Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku gained the stand eternal justice. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The air still tasted of ozone and cheap soda. Izuku Midoriya's legs felt like overboiled noodles, a sensation that had nothing to do with being crammed inside a 2-liter bottle and everything to do with the fact that he was currently standing in the presence of God, All Might. The All Might. He had just saved him, not on a television screen or in a grainy online video, but right here, in the flesh. The sheer gale force of his Texas smash had not only splattered the sludge villain across the underpass walls but had also seemingly blown all coherent thought from Izuku's mind. All that remained was a single, frantic, pulsating question. A question that had been the cornerstone of his entire existence, the foundation of his dreams and the source of his deepest despair. He had to ask. He just had to. It was this frantic need that led him to do the single most reckless and idiotic thing he had ever done in his 15 years of life, clinging to the leg of a soaring demigod as he launched into the sky. The wind was a physical beast, tearing at his uniform, trying to peel his fingers from the coarse fabric of All Might's cargo pants. Below him, the city became a circuit board of streets and buildings. It was terrifying. It was magnificent. It was, he registered with a distant part of his brain that wasn't currently screaming in abject terror, completely and utterly insane. When they landed, it was with a jarring thud on a gravel-strewn rooftop. The shock of the impact was enough to loosen his death grip. He tumbled onto the roof, coughing, his lungs burning, his mind a frantic mess. Good grief! All Might's voice boomed, a mixture of exasperation and concern. That was beyond reckless, young man. I love my fans, but that was too much. You could have been killed. He chopped his hand through the air, a gesture so iconic that Izuku almost forgot he was being scolded. Now I'm all out of time and... All Might stopped. A strange, sputtering sound, like a failing engine, escaped his lips. And then, in a plume of acrid steam that smelled faintly of blood, the god deflated. Where the mountain of muscle and optimism had stood, there was now a skeletal, almost skeletal figure. His eyes were sunken into shadowed pits, his cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass. His iconic golden hair was still there, but it looked limp and lifeless, framing a face etched with a permanent sort of pain. He coughed, a wet, ragged sound, and dabbed a trickle of blood from the corner of his mouth with the back of his hand. Izuku's world, which had already been spinning, tilted on its axis and fell into a black hole. What? Who? You're not. You're an imposter. A fake. The gaunt man sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 battles. I assure you, I am All Might. He sat down heavily on the rooftop, his posture folded, his t-shirt now comically oversized. He lifted it, revealing a horrific, sprawling scar that covered the left side of his torso. It was a chaotic vortex of ruined flesh, a spiderweb of mangled tissue and puckered skin that spoke of an injury so profound it should have killed any normal man. This is what a few too many battles with villains will do to you, he said, his voice now a quiet, tired rasp. This one was from a fight 5 years ago. You probably never heard about it. I made sure it was kept out of the press. An entire respiratory system destroyed, my stomach removed. I've wasted away because of the damage and the surgeries. He let the shirt fall. I can only be a hero for about 3 hours a day now. The rest of the time, I'm this. Izuku's mind was a maelstrom of shock, horror, and a dawning, terrible understanding. The symbol of peace was broken. The unflinching smile he showed the world was a mask, a brave front hiding this fragile, wounded reality. All the theories online, the speculation about his reduced screen time, it was all true. But even through the shock, the question remained. It was more important now than ever. Even so, Izuku began, his voice trembling, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He bowed his head, unable to look at the wounded hero. My whole life, I've been told I can't. Everyone, my classmates, my teachers, even my mom, she just cries. Because I don't have a quirk. He looked up, tears blurring his vision, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. This was it. The moment of truth. Is it possible for someone to become a hero, even if they don't have a quirk? He choked out, the words a raw, desperate prayer. Can a quirkless kid, can I ever hope to be someone like you? Silence. The wind whispered across the rooftop, kicking up dust. The distant sounds of the city felt a million miles away. All Might, the real, skeletal All Might, just looked at him. There was no booming laughter, no charismatic smile. There was only a profound, soul-crushing weariness in his sunken eyes. Kid, Toshinori Yagi began, his voice gentle but firm, like a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. You've got guts. More than most. That stunt you pulled clinging to my leg, there's spirit in you, no doubt. A tiny, fragile flicker of hope ignited in Izuku's chest, and then All Might extinguished it. But spirit isn't enough. Pro-heroics is a dangerous, unforgiving business. We risk our lives every single day. I'm sitting here, a cautionary tale in the flesh, to prove it. We fight villains who wouldn't hesitate to tear you apart, villains with quirks that can level city blocks or turn your mind to mush. He gestured vaguely with a thin hand. Without a power, you'd be a liability. You'd be the first to die. You can't just run into a fire with a bucket of water and expect to put it out. He looked Izuku straight in the eye, and the kindness in his gaze made the words cut even deeper. So no. I'm sorry, but I can't tell you that you can be a hero without a quirk. The world went silent. The distant traffic, the whisper of the wind, the frantic beating of his own heart, it all just stopped. Izuku felt the words land not in his ears, but in his very soul, where they shattered the last remaining pillar of his dream. His hero, the man whose image was plastered all over his bedroom, the very symbol of hope in his life, had just confirmed his deepest fear. You can't. It's impossible. Give up. His notebook, the one filled with years of analysis and hope, slipped from his numb fingers. It clattered to the gravel, the sound unnaturally loud in the crushing silence. I see, Izuku whispered. The words felt like sandpaper in his throat. It's not wrong to have dreams, young man, All Might said, standing up with a groan. Just make sure they're realistic. If you want to help people, you can become a police officer. They get a bad rap because they're mostly cleaning up after we do the heavy lifting, but it's a fine profession. He walked towards the door leading to the building's staircase, his steps slow and heavy. He didn't look back. The door creaked open, then shut with a heavy, final thud. Izuku was alone. He stood there for a long time, frozen, as the world slowly bled back into his senses. The city was still there. The sun was still shining. People were still living their lives, but for Izuku Midoriya, the world had ended. He was a ghost on a rooftop, a relic of a dream that had just been pronounced dead. He eventually bent down and picked up his notebook. Hero Analysis for the Future, number 13. The title was a cruel joke now. He walked to the staircase, his body moving on autopilot. Each step down was a descent into a new, colorless reality. He emerged onto the street, the noise and bustle of the crowd a physical assault. He didn't register any of it. All he could hear was All Might's voice, echoing in the hollow space where his hope used to be. No. I can't tell you that you can be a hero without a quirk. He walked. He didn't know where he was going. His feet just carried him forward, his gaze fixed on the cracks in the pavement. It was all a lie. The smile. The "you can be a hero" catchphrase. It was for other people. People with quirks. People who were born with the golden ticket. He was just a footnote, a Deku. Useless. Boom! A distant explosion snapped him out of his trance. Smoke billowed into the sky a few streets over. A villain attack. His old self, the self from 30 minutes ago, would have sprinted towards the action, notebook in hand, muttering a mile a minute. Now, he just watched the smoke with dead eyes. What was the point? It had nothing to do with him, but his feet, treacherous things that they were, began to move. Old habits died hard. He drifted towards the scene, drawn by a morbid curiosity, a desire to see the world he was now forever barred from. He found the source in a narrow shopping alley. A crowd was already gathered, held back by a line of struggling pro-heroes, and in the center of the chaos, thrashing and roaring, was a familiar, disgusting sight. The sludge villain. Izuku's blood ran cold. He got out. His mind raced. He looked at the plastic soda bottles in his pockets. All Might must have dropped them when Izuku had grabbed onto his leg. "It's my fault," he whispered, the realization a punch to the gut. The situation was dire. The alley was too narrow for Empty Lady to get in. Backdraft was busy putting out the fires the villain was causing. Kamui Woods was evacuating civilians, his wood-based quirk useless against the liquid enemy. Death Arms was trying to punch his way through, but his fists just sank uselessly into the churning sludge. They were all there, all the heroes, and they were all stymied. Their quirks were the wrong tools for the job. And then, through the swirling, muddy green form, Izuku saw him. A flash of spiky, ash-blonde hair. A pair of wild, terrified red eyes. Kaken. The sludge villain had found a new skin suit, and it was his childhood friend, his lifelong bully, his rival. Bakugo was thrashing, setting off explosions within the villain's body. But it was only making things worse, a desperate, violent struggle for air that was only tightening the villain's grip. Those explosions, usually a symbol of Bakugo's overwhelming power and confidence, were now small, pathetic pops of desperation. He was suffocating. He was dying, and it was Izuku's fault. The heroes weren't moving. They were waiting. Waiting for someone with the right quirk to show up. Waiting, while Kaken drowned on dry land. The crowd murmured. Why aren't they doing anything? The villain's too strong. Poor kid. And in the crowd, Izuku saw him. The gaunt, skeletal form of Toshinori Yagi, clutching his side, his face a mask of impotent agony. He had reached his limit. He was powerless. Just like Izuku, he saw Kaken's eyes meet his. For a single, horrifying second, the usual arrogance and anger were gone. They were replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. It was a plea. A silent, desperate scream for help. Something inside Izuku Midoriya snapped. He didn't think. He didn't analyze. He didn't weigh the pros and cons. His hero had told him no. The world had told him no. His own body was telling him no. But Kaken's eyes had said help. His legs moved on their own. He burst through the crowd, a blur of green and black. Kid! Stop! Get back here! A hero shouted. He ignored it. The world narrowed to a single, frantic purpose. He wasn't running towards a villain. He was running towards a person who needed saving. He didn't have a plan. He just had a scream building in his chest. His school bag. He ripped it off his shoulder and hurled it with all his might. It sailed through the air and struck the villain squarely in the eye. It was a pathetic, useless gesture, but it accomplished one thing. It startled the monster. For a fraction of a second, its grip loosened. Bakugo gasped, a desperate, rattling intake of air. Kaken! Izuku screamed, his voice raw. He reached the villain and began to claw at the sludge, his fingers digging into the viscous ooze. I couldn't just stand there and watch you die. What the hell are you doing here, Deku? Bakugo roared, his voice thick with sludge and fury. Stop! My legs just started moving. Izuku cried, tears streaming down his face, his frantic clawing doing nothing. It was useless. He was useless. He was going to die. They were both going to die, and it was all his fault. The villain laughed, a gurgling, horrible sound. A new meat shield. Thanks, kid, you're a real hero. A huge, slimy tendril rose up, poised to smash down on Izuku. He saw it coming. He closed his eyes. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry, All Might. I'm sorry, Kaken. But beneath the fear, beneath the despair, something else was stirring. A white-hot, furious indignation. This wasn't right. It wasn't fair. A villain was murdering someone in broad daylight, while heroes stood by, unable to act. An innocent person, even if that person was Kaken, was about to die. It was an aberration, a fundamental violation of the way the world should be. A scream, silent and formless, tore through his very soul. It wasn't a sound made of air and vocal cords. It was a cry of pure, undiluted will. A desperate, primal demand for order in the face of chaos. A prayer for justice. Someone, save him! The world erupted in gold. It wasn't an explosion. It was a manifestation. A column of brilliant, warm, golden light erupted from Izuku's back, so bright it forced everyone in the alley to shield their eyes. There was no heat, no destructive force, only an overwhelming sense of presence. A sound chimed, not in the air, but in the minds of everyone present, the pure, resonant toll of a colossal bell. From within the pillar of light, a figure solidified. It was tall, impossibly tall, towering over Izuku like a silent protector. It was a knight, but not from any history book. It was clad head to toe in ornate, interlocking plates of radiant gold armor, etched with geometric patterns that seemed to shift and writhe like living things. It was androgynous, its form lean and powerful, but possessing no defining features of gender. Where its face should have been, there was only a smooth, perfect, mirrored helm. It reflected not the world around it, but the observer. The heroes saw their own helplessness. The crowd saw their own fear. The sludge villain saw its own grotesque form. And Bakugo, for a split second, saw his own terrified, furious face staring back at him. On the knight's broad shoulders, two ethereal, glowing scales hovered, perfectly balanced. They pulsed with a soft, internal light, the fulcrum of some cosmic law. The slime tendril, which had been plummeting towards Izuku, halted. It didn't hit an invisible wall. It just stopped. Its momentum was gone. The tendril hung in the air for a second, robbed of its kinetic purpose, before deflating back into the villain's main body. The Golden Knight did not move. It did not attack. It simply stood there, a silent, implacable judgment. Its mere presence seemed to impose a new rule on reality. The churning, chaotic sludge around Bakugo began to recede, pushed back not by a physical force, but as if by a fundamental principle. It was like trying to force two matching magnetic poles together. The sludge, born of malicious intent, could not occupy the same space as this beacon of absolute order. The pressure eased. Bakugo found he could breathe. He could move. The villain shrieked in confusion and frustration, trying to reclaim its hold, but the golden presence was absolute. In the crowd, Toshinori Yagi stared, his sunken eyes wide with disbelief. He had just told this boy he was nothing. He had crushed his dream and left him in pieces. And now, that same boy, that quirkless, spirit-filled boy, had done the impossible. He had manifested a miracle. It wasn't a quirk, not as he knew them. It was something else. Something ancient. Something born from that same heroic spirit Toshinori had just callously dismissed. Pathetic, Toshinori whispered, but he wasn't talking about Izuku. He was talking about himself. A fire he hadn't felt in years roared to life in his withered chest. Shame and inspiration were a potent fuel. While the boy's spirit created a sanctuary, his own power could provide the salvation. I really am pathetic. The crowd gasped as the skeletal man suddenly ballooned, steam billowing from him. Even though I admonished you, I wasn't putting what I said into practice. Muscle, power, and overwhelming presence returned in a flash. Pros are always risking their lives. That's the true test of a hero. All Might was back. He shot forward, a golden-haired comet. DKU! Bakugo screamed, still trapped but watching in utter confusion as the number one hero appeared. Detroit Smash! All Might's fist slammed into the villain. The punch was aimed with surgical precision, away from the boys. The air pressure alone was a cataclysm. The sludge villain was instantly, violently dispersed, splattering across the alley walls for the second time that day. The sky, which had been clear, suddenly clouded over. A few seconds later, it began to rain. All Might had changed the weather with a single punch. The Golden Knight, its duty done, flickered. It gave one last look, its mirrored helm reflecting a stunned but safe Bakugo and a trembling, exhausted Izuku. Then, as silently as it had appeared, it dissolved back into motes of golden light that flowed back into Izuku's body. Izuku swayed on his feet, the adrenaline leaving him in a dizzying rush. He felt empty. Drained. Like he had run a dozen marathons at once. His knees gave out, and he collapsed onto the wet pavement, his mind a blank slate of shock and exhaustion. The aftermath was a blur. Paramedics checked him over, finding nothing but exhaustion and a few scrapes. Pro heroes descended upon him, but not with praise. That was incredibly reckless, kid. There's a difference between bravery and foolishness. Death Arm scolded, his thick arms crossed. You have a powerful quirk, but no license. You could be charged with vigilantism. Another hero added. Izuku just sat there, wrapped in a shock blanket, not processing any of it. Quirk? Was that what it was? That golden thing? He hadn't controlled it. It had just happened. He looked over at Bakugo, who was being mobbed by heroes praising his bravery and his powerful quirk. Bakugo's eyes found Izuku's. There was no gratitude. There was no respect. There was only a burning, confused, and deeply humiliated rage. Izuku had seen him at his weakest, and then, inexplicably, had saved him with some unknown power. The social order of their entire lives had just been thrown into a blender. As the crowd dispersed and the reporters were shooed away, Izuku began the long, quiet walk home. He was in a daze. He had been rejected by his idol, caused a disaster, and then manifested some kind of guardian angel knight. Everything had changed. Nothing had changed. He was still quirkless Izuku, but now with a terrifying question mark attached to him. DKU, he turned. It was Bakugo, running to catch up, his face a thundercloud. I didn't ask for your help. He snarled, his voice low and tight. I didn't need it. I had it handled. You didn't save me. Got it? Don't you ever look down on me again, you damn nerd. You're still a pebble. I don't know what that light show was, but don't think for a second it changes anything. He turned and stormed off, leaving Izuku standing alone under a streetlight. Izuku didn't feel hurt. He just felt tired. He was almost home when a familiar voice, a voice that was now two different voices in his head, called out to him. I am here! All Might, in his full hero form, zipped out from a side street, coming to a dramatic halt. All Might! What are you doing here? Izuku stammered. To thank you, All Might boomed, before deflating again in a cloud of steam, clutching his side and coughing. And to apologize. Izuku stared at the gaunt form of Toshinori Yagi. But, for what? It was my fault the villain got away. I wasted your time. And I did nothing, Toshinori cut him off, his voice heavy with self-reproach. I stood in that crowd, a spectator, while you, a frightened, quirkless boy who I had just lectured, were the only one who acted. You, with no thought for your own safety, ran in to save someone. You spurred me to act. You reminded me what it means to be a hero. Izuku's eyes welled with tears, and then Toshinori's voice became softer, filled with a deep, analytical curiosity. There was the light. The Golden Knight. Tell me, young man. What is that power? Izuku shook his head, wiping at his eyes. I don't know. I've been quirkless my whole life. The doctors, the tests, they all said I had the extra toe joint. It never happened before. Toshinori nodded slowly, his gaze distant. I see. It is not a quirk then. Not in the traditional sense. When I saw you run, I saw your spirit. All the greatest heroes, they have stories like this. Their bodies moved before they could think. For you, it seems your spirit did more than just move your body. It took form. He looked at Izuku, and for the first time, the broken man on the rooftop was gone. In his place was a mentor, a teacher, his eyes alight with a new purpose. What I said on that rooftop. I was wrong. Not about the danger. The danger is real. But I was wrong about you. Izuku held his breath. I told you that you couldn't be a hero without a quirk, Toshinori said, a small, genuine smile gracing his thin lips. But you proved that what truly matters is not the power you're born with, but the spirit that drives you. Your spirit was so strong, it created a power of its own. I don't know what that Golden Knight is. It is a mystery, a miracle. But with a spirit that can call forth a miracle like that. He leaned forward, his sunken eyes locking with Izuku's. Yes, young man. You can become a hero. The words. They were the words he had been waiting his entire life to hear. They weren't a lie. They weren't a platitude. They were a truth, earned in fire and sludge and desperation. Tears streamed freely down Izuku's face as he collapsed to his knees, sobbing not from despair, but from a profound, overwhelming relief. Toshinori let him cry for a moment before continuing. This power of yours, this eternal justice as it seems to be, it is an unknown. It's reactive, defensive. It appeared only when a profound injustice was about to occur. It's not a tool for wanton destruction. It's a shield. A verdict. A power like that, in the hands of someone with your heart, it has incredible potential. He offered a hand to Izuku. But potential is not enough. You need training. You need control. Your body is not ready to handle the backlash of such a power, and you cannot rely on it alone. You need to become strong in your own right. Izuku looked up, his face a mess of tears and snot, but his eyes shining with a light that had been dead just an hour ago. I don't have a quirk to give you, young Midoriya, Toshinori said, his voice firm and resolute. I cannot make you my successor in that way. But your journey is not mine to dictate. You are on a different path. And I would be honored to help you walk it. I will help you train your body. I will help you understand this strange power. I will help you get into UA. He looked at the boy who had saved him as much as he had saved anyone else that day. This is your story now. The story of how you, Izuku Midoriya, became a hero in your own unique way. Izuku took his hand, his grip surprisingly firm. The world was still a terrifying, uncertain place. He was still, by all official accounts, quirkless. He possessed a power he did not understand and could not control. But for the first time in his entire life, he had a path. He had a mentor. He had hope. The day everything changed was the day he was told he could never be a hero. The day nothing changed was the day he learned he was going to be one anyway. The first morning of the rest of his life began with a groan. Every muscle in Izuku Midoriya's body felt like it had been individually tenderized with a meat mallet, then tied into a series of intricate, painful knots. He rolled over in his all-might-themed bedsheets, the familiar, smiling face on his comforter seeming to mock his current state of agony. For a delirious moment, he wondered if it had all been a dream, the sludge, Kaken's terrified eyes, the impossible golden night, and the skeletal, broken form of his idol offering him a lifeline. But the phantom ache in his soul, the echo of that vast, golden power flowing out of him, was too real. So was the text message glowing on his phone, sent from an unknown number at an ungodly hour, 5 a.m. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. Don't be late. It was followed by a string of emojis version of All Might's signature V for victory pose. Izuku felt a thrill jolt through him that almost made him forget the pain. This was it. This was real. His training was beginning. He dressed quietly, his movements stiff. He put on his favorite t-shirt shirt, a sense of irony washing over him. The fabric felt different today, not a symbol of a distant dream but the uniform of an apprentice. He scribbled a quick note for his mother, going for a run. Be back later. And slipped out of the apartment as the pre-dawn sky was just beginning to blush from bruised purple to a soft, hopeful gray. The train ride was a blur of nervous energy. Dagoba Beach. He knew of it, of course. It had once been a beautiful stretch of coastline, but for the last decade, it had become the city's unofficial dumping ground. Ocean currents had conspired to wash the detritus of society onto its shores, turning a place of natural beauty into a junkyard memorial to human carelessness. What kind of training could possibly happen there? A specialized gym, a private danger room facility. Those made sense. A trash-filled beach did not. He arrived to find the scene was even worse than he'd imagined. Mounds of rusted appliances, tangled nests of rebar, mountains of discarded electronics, and teetering towers of old tires formed a grotesque, man-made mountain range against the backdrop of the rising sun. The air was thick with the smell of salt, rust, and decay. And standing there, in his gaunt form, silhouetted against the sunrise, was Toshinori Yagi. He wore a simple tracksuit and looked even thinner in the stark morning light. You're on time, my boy, Toshinori said, his voice a quiet rasp that was barely audible over the gentle lapping of the waves against the shore. Good. Punctuality is a cornerstone of heroics. All might, sir. Toshinori-san. Izuku stammered, unsure of the correct honorific for a god in mortal form. What is all this? Why are we here? Toshinori's gaze swept across the landscape of garbage. This, he said, with a sweep of his bony arm, is your training ground. Your weight room. Your dojo. He turned to look at Izuku, his sunken eyes sharp and serious. And your first step towards becoming a hero. He pointed to a particularly large, decrepit refrigerator, its door hanging off one hinge like a broken jaw. Your goal for the next 10 months is simple. You are going to clean this entire beach, every last piece of trash. You will move it all to the designated disposal area for the city to haul away. Izuku stared at him, then at the refrigerator, then at the seemingly endless miles of junk stretching down the coastline. It wasn't just a big task, it was a Sisyphean one. It looked impossible. But why? Izuku asked, bewildered. I thought I was going to train to be a hero. How is hauling trash going to help me fight villains? Toshinori coughed, dabbing his mouth with a handkerchief. A fair question. Listen closely, young Midoriya. Yesterday, you did not defeat that villain with your fists. You did it with your spirit. That golden night, that stand, as you've started calling it in your muttering, it is a manifestation of your will. It is your soul-given form and purpose. He walked over to Izuku and placed a thin, almost skeletal hand on his shoulder. But a soul, a spirit, needs a worthy vessel. Right now, your body is a teacup trying to contain an ocean. When that stand appeared, it drew its power from your life force, from your very stamina. That's why you collapsed. That's why you feel like you've been run over by a truck today. If you were to face a truly powerful, truly malicious villain, your stand might manifest a power so great that the backlash would shatter your unprepared body. You'd be a firework, one brilliant flash, and then nothing. He gestured again to the junkyard. This is not about hauling trash. This is about building the vessel. Every piece you lift, every step you take, you will be forging a body that can withstand the weight of your own justice. You will build muscle, endurance, and fortitude. And, he added, a faint twinkle in his eye, as a bonus, you'll be performing a great community service. A hero's work is never just about fighting. It's about making the world a better place, piece by piece. Izuku looked from the trash to Toshinori's earnest, pained face. He thought of the golden night, the feeling of that immense power. He thought of the crushing exhaustion that followed. It made sense. A terrible, exhausting, back-breaking kind of sense. Okay, Izuku said, his voice filled with a new resolve. Okay. I'll do it. That's the spirit, Toshinori said, his voice gaining a sliver of All Might's boom. He produced a ridiculously detailed schedule from his pocket, the aim to pass, American Dream Plan. It outlined everything: diet, sleep schedules, workout regimens, stretches, and schoolwork periods. It was the most intense document Izuku had ever seen. The first attempt was humiliating. He tried to budge the refrigerator. He strained, his face turning beet red, muscles he didn't know he had screaming in protest. The fridge didn't move an inch. He ended up just falling backwards into a pile of smelly garbage bags. Toshinori just watched. Start smaller, my boy. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Or in this case, a single rusted microwave, and so it began. The 10 months of hell. Every morning before school, and every afternoon after. Rain or shine. Izuku's life became a cycle of pain, exhaustion, and small, incremental victories. The first few weeks, he did little more than throw up behind a pile of tires and drag small pieces of scrap metal a few feet at a time. His hands became a geography of calluses, blisters, and cuts. His back was a constant dull ache. Toshinori was a surprisingly effective, if eccentric, coach. He couldn't do any of the lifting himself, but he was a fountain of knowledge. He corrected Izuku's form. Lift with your legs, my boy, not your back. You'll snap in half like a twig, shouted encouragement from atop a pile of washing machines, and supervised his diet with an iron fist. Izuku's meals went from simple home-cooked fare to protein-heavy, nutrient-dense mountains of food that he had to force down. Eat! Toshinori would command, watching Izuku struggle with another bowl of rice and fish. Your body is a construction site. You need the raw materials to build. As the months passed, a change began. The piles of trash started to shrink, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. And Izuku's body began to change with them. The soft, undefined lines of a sedentary teenager hardened. Scrawny arms thickened with lean muscle. A chest and back, once narrow, broadened. The exhaustion was still there, But now it was the satisfying burn of well-used muscles, not the brittle fatigue of near collapse. He could now haul the refrigerator that had bested him on day one. He dragged it across the sand, his feet digging in, his every muscle firing in unison, a guttural roar tearing from his throat. It felt like a monumental achievement. With his body growing stronger, Toshinori decided it was time for the next phase of training. "All right, young Midoriya," he said one crisp autumn afternoon, about 4 months in. "Your physical conditioning is progressing well. It's time we started to understand the tool your spirit has forged. We need to know the rules of eternal justice." They stood on a cleared patch of sand. "Try to summon it," Toshinori instructed. Izuku closed his eyes. He focused. He thought about the sludge villain, about Kaken's face. He tried to dredge up that feeling of desperate, righteous fury. He felt a flicker, a faint warmth in his spine, but nothing happened. He opened his eyes, frustrated. "I can't," he said, panting from the mental effort. It's not a switch I can just flip, as I suspected," Toshinori mused. "It is reactive. It requires a catalyst. An injustice." He paused. "All right. I have an idea. It's a bit risky, so stay on your toes." With a puff of steam, the skeletal man swelled into the colossal form of All Might. The change was still jarring, a physical impossibility that Izuku was slowly getting used to. "No!" All Might boomed, his voice shaking the very air. "I am going to attack you. Do not fear. I will hold back. But prepare yourself." Izuku's eyes widened in panic, but he stood his ground, planting his feet in the sand. All Might drew back a fist, the air crackling around it. He threw a punch, aiming for the air just to the left of Izuku's face. Even held back, the punch was terrifyingly fast, the wind it generated whipping Izuku's hair back. Izuku flinched, but something happened. That familiar warmth bloomed in his chest. A translucent, shimmering golden gauntlet flickered into existence around his arm, moving on its own to intercept the path of the punch. All Might's fist, which could level a building, connected with the ghostly armor. The result was nothing. There was no earth-shattering impact. There was no transference of force. It felt, to Izuku, like a gentle tap. The golden gauntlet absorbed the kinetic energy, shimmered for a moment, and then faded away. The scales that Izuku could now faintly perceive hovering over his own shoulders barely twitched. All Might drew his arm back, a thoughtful look on his face. He deflated back into Toshinori, coughing. "Fascinating," he wheezed. "I put a considerable amount of force into that. But it felt hollow. There was no charge. No power build-up for a counterattack." He looked at Izuku. "I think I understand. When I threw that punch, I had no desire to harm you. My will was the complete opposite. I was actively trying not to hurt you. My intent was for training, for demonstration. It seems your stand can distinguish not just an action, but the intent behind it. It recognized the force, but not the malice. So, it only works against people who actually want to hurt me?" Izuku asked, his mind racing. He started muttering, pacing back and forth. "So if the attack is accidental, or if it's from someone who's being controlled, or someone who doesn't have a will of their own, it might not work. Or it would be weaker? What are the thresholds? Is it a binary system or a spectrum of maliciousness? Does the scale of the injustice matter? Like, is a villain trying to rob a bank a greater injustice than a mugger, and does that grant more power? What about emotional harm? Does it react to taunts or just physical attacks?" Whoa, easy there, my boy," Toshinori chuckled. "One question at a time. These are the things we must discover. But for now, we have a working theory. Eternal justice feeds on malice. On injustice. The more unjust the act, the more powerful the reaction." Their proof came a few weeks later, in a much less controlled environment. They were walking home after a grueling evening session. The sun had long set, and the streetlights cast long shadows. Izuku was so tired he was practically sleepwalking, his gym bag slung over a shoulder that burned with exhaustion. They passed a dark alleyway, and a figure lurched out. He was gaunt, his eyes wide and frantic with desperation. He brandished a small, grimy utility knife, the blade catching the orange glow of the streetlight. Give me your wallets! Phones too! Everything! Now! The man snarled, his voice cracking with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. Toshinori immediately stepped in front of Izuku, his body tense. Izuku's exhaustion vanished, replaced by a jolt of ice-cold fear. This wasn't a test. This was real. The man's eyes were fixed on them, filled with a desperate, hungry intent. This wasn't a game. This was a man willing to hurt them to get what he wanted. The mugger lunged, not at the imposing, though skeletal, Toshinori, but at the smaller, younger target. He slashed with the knife, a wild, clumsy arc aimed at Izuku's arm. Izuku didn't even have time to think. He just acted. He threw his body sideways, trying to put himself between the attacker and his mentor. But he wasn't alone. The world exploded in gold. This was not the translucent flicker from the beach. This was a full, instantaneous, brilliant manifestation. Eternal justice appeared in all its glory, a silent, incandescent sentinel. The scales on its shoulders, which had been placid before, dipped violently. The scale representing the mugger's action plunged downwards, glowing an angry, menacing red, while the scale representing Izuku's defense soared upwards, shining with a pure, white gold light. The knight's golden gauntlet moved with impossible speed, intercepting the knife. The blade didn't just stop, it disintegrated. The metal turned to dust upon contact with the sanctified armor. The mugger froze, his eyes wide with utter shock and terror, staring at the impossible golden god that had appeared from nowhere. Eternal justice didn't throw a punch. It didn't need to. It simply opened its hand and pushed. It was a gesture, not a strike. The movement was slow, almost gentle, but it was backed by the entirety of the kinetic force from the knife slash, amplified by the malicious intent it had judged and absorbed. The mugger was launched backwards as if struck by a freight train. He flew a full 20 feet down the alley, crashing into a pile of overflowing trash cans with a sickening thud. He wasn't bleeding, he wasn't broken, but he was instantly unconscious, the fight and the will completely knocked out of him. And then, as quickly as it had come, the stand dissolved, flowing back into Izuku. This time, he felt the backlash. It wasn't the bone-deep exhaustion from the sludge villain incident, but it was a sharp, dizzying vertigo. He felt a surge of energy, the absorbed injustice, flow through him, making his skin tingle and his head swim. He stumbled, and Toshinori caught him. "Easy, my boy. Breathe," the hero said, his own eyes wide with awe. He quickly checked on the mugger, found a steady pulse, and called the police on a burner phone, giving an anonymous tip. As they hurried away, Toshinori looked at Izuku, who was leaning against the wall, trying to catch his breath. "Now we know," Toshinori said, his voice grim. "It's exactly as we theorized. The purer the malice, the more absolute the response. It didn't just block the attack, it absorbed the injustice of the act itself and turned it into power. It didn't seek to kill him, only to neutralize him. It delivered a verdict." Izuku nodded, his mind reeling. He had just witnessed his power, his soul, pass judgment. It was terrifying and awe-inspiring. "Eternal justice," Izuku whispered, the name feeling more real and fitting than ever before. "It judged him." Toshinori placed a hand on his shoulder. "It is a heavy, powerful name, my boy. And it carries a heavy weight. A power like this, it's not a weapon. It's a responsibility. You must be the one to bear that weight." The final months flew by in a flurry of intense training. Izuku's body became a lean, powerful machine. The last pieces of trash were cleared from Dagoba Beach. On the final morning, exactly 10 months after he began, Izuku stood atop the last remaining pile, a compacted cube of rusting metal, and screamed his triumph at the rising sun. The beach was pristine, the sand clean and golden, the waves washing over a shore that was finally healed. Toshinori, watching from a distance, had a tear in his eye. He took a photo. Oh my goodness!" he whispered, his pride palpable. Izuku climbed down, his body humming with power and accomplishment. He wasn't the same boy who had stumbled onto this beach 10 months ago. He was strong. He was ready, or so he thought. Later that day, Toshinori sat with him on a park bench, the mood more somber. "The UA entrance exam is tomorrow," Toshinori said. You have done everything I have asked of you. Your body is ready. Your spirit is strong. But we have to face the hard truth we've uncovered. Izuku's heart sank. He knew what was coming. The practical exam is against robots, Toshinori stated bluntly. They are machines. They follow programming. They have no will, no malice, no soul to be judged. They are the perfect counter to eternal justice. The triumph Izuku had felt that morning evaporated, replaced by a familiar, chilling dread. After all this work, all this pain and sacrifice, was he back to square one? Powerless when it mattered most? He started to spiral, the old Deku voice whispering in his ear. See? Useless. You trained your body, but your true power is conditional. It's a fluke. You'll get 0 points. You'll fail. He began to mutter, his hands gripping his knees. No will, no malice, the stand won't react. I can't attack them. I can't generate any offensive power on my own, all that work, for nothing. I'll be out there, with just my fists against tons of steel. It's hopeless, young Midoriya. Toshinori's voice was firm, cutting through the panicked muttering. Izuku looked up. Did you clean that entire beach with your stand? And no, Izuku said. Did you build this new body with a quirk? No, You did it with your own 2 hands. With your own sweat and grit, Toshinori said, his gaze intense. The stand is a part of you, but it is not all of you. For 10 months, you have trained to be a hero who can function without it. The exam is not just about destruction. It never has been. A spark lit in Izuku's mind. His muttering started again, but this time it wasn't panicked. It was analytical. Other points. There are other points, he whispered. The orientation packet mentioned them, but didn't elaborate. People always focus on the villain points. But what if there are points for something else? For heroism? Rescue. His eyes lit up. The robots are dangerous. They'll be attacking other examinees. People will get trapped, or cornered. I can't destroy the robots, but I'm fast now. I'm strong. I can get people out of the way. I can be a shield. I can use my strength to clear rubble, to pull people to safety. That has to be worth something, right? He looked at Toshinori, a desperate, brilliant plan forming in his frantic thoughts. I will focus entirely on rescue, Izuku declared, his voice shaking but firm. I will earn my place by saving others, not by fighting. And maybe, if a situation becomes truly, fundamentally unjust, if someone is about to be genuinely hurt, and I am the only one who can stop it, then maybe, just maybe, eternal justice will deliver its verdict. Toshinori Yagi smiled. It was a wide, genuine smile that reached his sunken eyes, filled with more pride than any of All Might's booming laughs. That, he said, his voice thick with emotion, is the most heroic plan I have ever heard. You are ready, my boy. Go and show them what justice truly means. As Izuku walked home, the weight of the coming day felt immense. He was terrified. He was walking into a battle he was designed to lose, but for the first time, he felt the weight of his own strength, the weight of his training, the weight of his resolve. And it felt good. It felt like a foundation he could stand on, even when his miraculous, golden power remained silent. The colossal gates of Yuri High School were less like an entrance, and more like a statement. They loomed over Izuku, monoliths of polished steel and ambition, a physical representation of the barrier between his old life and his potential future. For years, he had only seen them in pictures, dreaming of the day he would walk through them. Now that he was here, all he could feel was a nauseating cocktail of terror and awe. His stomach felt like it was full of startled bats. He took a deep breath, the crisp morning air doing little to calm the frantic thrumming in his veins. You are ready, All Might's voice echoed in his head. You have a plan. Focus on rescue. Right. The plan. It was a good plan, a heroic plan. But it was also a plan born of necessity, a workaround for the gaping flaw in his power. It was a gamble of epic proportions, betting his entire future on a hidden scoring system that might not even exist. Out of my way, Deku, the voice, dripping with its usual acidic contempt, cut through his thoughts. Bakugo Katsuki shoved past him, not even bothering to look back. He radiated an aura of explosive confidence, his stride long and sure, his hands jammed in his pockets. He belonged here. Izuku, with his zero-offense strategy, felt like an imposter who'd snuck in through a side door. Just as he was about to take his first step forward, his foot caught on an uneven paving stone. With the grace of a newborn fawn, he pitched forward, his face destined for an intimate meeting with the concrete. A great start, Midoriya, he thought miserably. Trip and fall before you even get inside. Perfect. But the impact never came. He stopped, hovering inches from the ground, a strange, light feeling enveloping him. Whoa there! Are you all right? A bright, cheerful voice asked. He twisted his head to see a girl with a round, kind face and rosy cheeks. She had short brown hair and was holding her hands together, her pinky fingers extended. He was floating. It's my quirk, she explained with a smile, helping him back to his feet. Sorry for using it on you without asking, but it would be bad luck to fall right before the exam, right? She pressed her fingertips together, and he settled back onto the ground with a soft bump. Gotta go! Good luck in there! She gave a little wave and then hurried off towards the main building, leaving Izuku standing there, his face burning a shade of red that would make a stop sign jealous. He'd just been saved by a girl, a very nice girl. He hadn't even managed to thank her. He slapped his cheeks. Focus, Izuku. Rescue plan. Not pretty girls with gravity quirks. The written exam was a blur of logic puzzles, advanced mathematics, and literary analysis. He felt confident he'd done well. His meticulous study habits, reinforced by Toshinori's American Dream Plan, had paid off. But that was just the appetizer. The main course was the practical exam, and it was being hosted by the voice hero himself, President Mike. The orientation hall was massive, a dark auditorium filled with hundreds of nervous, chattering examinees. The lights dimmed, and a spotlight hit the stage, revealing the leather-clad hero with his signature skyscraper-high blonde hair. Hi, little listeners! Welcome to the UA practical exam! Can I get a hey? The hall was met with dead silence. Izuku, ever the fanboy, felt a pang of second-hand embarrassment for him. President Mike, undeterred, launched into his explanation. The screen behind him lit up with pixelated graphics of 3 distinct types of robots. Like your application said, you'll be racking up points by taking down these faux villains in our super hip urban battlegrounds. There are 3 types, 1-pointers, 2-pointers, and 3-pointers. Your goal is to use your quirks to immobilize as many as you can. Izuku's eyes were glued to the screen. They were unmistakably machines. Cold, unthinking, without a shred of malice. His heart sank a little further. Eternal justice would remain a silent passenger. A sharp voice cut through President Mick's presentation. A tall, well-built student with glasses stood up, chopping the air with his hand. Excuse me, sir. On the printout, there are 4 types of villains listed. If this is a misprint, it is a gross failing for Japan's top hero school. Furthermore, you, with the curly green hair. He pointed directly at Izuku. You have been muttering this entire time. It is distracting and unbecoming of a potential UA student. If you are not taking this seriously, you should leave. The entire hall turned to look at him. Izuku shrank in his seat, his face on fire. Sorry, he squeaked. President Mike chuckled. All right, examinee 7111, nice catch. Thanks for the call out. The 4th villain type is the 0-pointer. Think of it as a stage gimmick. A big OL obstacle to avoid. It's worth no points, so I recommend you runts just run away. Izuku looked down at his Battle Center card. Battle Center B. He glanced over and saw that the nice girl from the entrance was also in B. At least there'd be one friendly face. Not that he'd have the courage to talk to her. They were herded onto buses and driven to their respective battlegrounds. Battle Center B was a sprawling, meticulously constructed cityscape. Towering skyscrapers, quiet residential streets, bustling commercial avenues. It was a perfect replica of a modern city, and it was about to become a war zone. The examinees milled around the massive entrance gates, stretching and sizing each other up. Izuku saw laser cannons sprouting from one boy's stomach. Another girl had what looked like vine-like hair, and one guy was stretching his limbs like they were made of rubber. Everyone had a tool for destruction. Izuku just had his newly toned muscles and a desperate plan. He tried to do some stretches, his legs trembling. He saw the nice girl again, looking just as nervous as he felt. He wanted to go over and wish her luck, to thank her properly, but his feet felt like they were bolted to the ground. She was talking to the glasses-wearing student who had called him out. They looked serious, probably strategizing. He was just, here, and start! Present Mix's voice blared from hidden speakers. Nobody moved. The silence was thick with confusion. What's the matter? There's no countdown in a real fight. Run! Run! The die is cast, that was the signal. The entire crowd surged forward in a chaotic wave of quirks and ambition. Izuku was left in the dust, momentarily stunned. He shook his head and sprinted after them, his newly powerful legs carrying him into the city at a surprising speed. The city was already chaos. Explosions rocked the street as a one-point bot was blown to pieces. A three-pointer was ensnared in what looked like purple, sticky balls. Everyone was scoring points, their quirks a dazzling and deadly fireworks display. Izuku ran. He didn't engage. He just ran, his eyes scanning every street, every alley, every window. His plan was simple. Find someone in trouble. Be a hero, not a fighter. He saw a girl with a tail quirk get knocked back by a two-pointer's cannon. The robot advanced on her, its red optic glowing. Before it could fire again, Izuku was there. He didn't attack the machine. He scooped the girl up. She was surprisingly light, and sprinted out of the line of fire, depositing her safely around a corner. Thanks, she yelled before whipping her tail around and smashing it into the robot's leg joint, toppling it. Another point for her. 0 for him. This became his pattern. He was a phantom, a green blur zipping through the battlefield. He pulled a boy with an engine quirk out from under some rubble caused by a stray explosion. He tackled an examinee out of the way of a charging one-pointer. He shouted warnings, pointed out ambushes, and used his physical strength to clear paths. His speed and agility, honed by 10 months of dodging falling trash and navigating the Dagoba junkyard, were on a level few could match. He was a parkour expert born from necessity, leaping over cars, vaulting fences, and scaling small buildings to get a better vantage point. He was helping. He was saving people, but his point counter remained stubbornly, depressingly at 0. The other examinees started to notice him. They'd see a flash of green, and suddenly the robot bearing down on them would find its target gone. They'd be pulled from a trap they didn't even see. He was the battlefield's guardian angel, earning appreciative nods and grateful shouts, but no points. He could hear the whispers. Who's that kid? He hasn't taken down a single bot. Is his quirk super speed? Why isn't he fighting? The doubt began to creep in. His plan felt right, but what if Yue's definition of a hero was different? What if it really was just about combat prowess? All this effort, only to be rejected for not being destructive enough. The thought was a cold knot in his stomach. He was perched on a fire escape, catching his breath and scanning the street below, when the ground began to tremble. It started as a low rumble, a vibration he felt in his teeth. Then it grew, the tremors becoming violent shudders that rattled windows and sent dust raining down from the buildings. A colossal shadow fell over the street. Izuku looked up, and his blood ran cold. The 0-pointer. Present Mix's description hadn't done it justice. It wasn't an obstacle. It was a god of destruction. It was a single, mobile skyscraper, its metallic chassis scraping against the tops of the surrounding buildings. Its head was a block of sensors and optics, and its arms were the size of city buses. It moved with a ponderous, inexorable weight, each step a miniature earthquake that cracked the asphalt. The other examinees, who had been fighting with such bravado moments before, took one look at it and remembered Present Mix's advice. They ran. A tide of panicked students fled in the opposite direction, a desperate scramble to get away from the walking catastrophe. Less than 2 minutes remaining. Present Mix's voice announced, adding to the panic. Izuku was about to run, too. This thing was beyond him. His plan was to save people, not to commit suicide by skyscraper. But as he turned to leap off the fire escape, a faint cry reached his ears. Ow! He froze. He scanned the street at the base of the approaching behemoth. And he saw her. the nice girl from the entrance. The one who had saved him from falling. Uraraka Ochako. She was trapped, her leg pinned beneath a large slab of concrete, undoubtedly shaken loose by the zero-pointer's approach. She was trying desperately to push it off, but it was too heavy. Tears of pain and frustration streamed down her face as she watched the monstrous robot bear down on her. The world went into slow motion. The other students were gone. The proctors watching from their monitors were likely holding their breath, waiting to see if they needed to intervene. The robot, a mindless engine of destruction, continued its advance, its massive foot rising to take another earth-shaking step, a step that would land directly on top of her. This was it. This was the moment. It wasn't a sparring match. It wasn't a training exercise. This was a real, tangible, immediate threat. A good, kind person who had shown him compassion was about to be crushed into paste by an unthinking, unfeeling force. It was wrong. It was a fundamental violation of everything he believed in. It was a perversion of order. It was, in the purest sense of the word, unjust. The whispering doubt, the fear of failure, the panic, it all vanished, burned away by a single, white-hot, incandescent thought. I have to save her. The scream that had been building in his soul since the sludge villain incident, the one he now recognized as the clarion call for his power, erupted once more. It wasn't a sound. It was an edict, a command issued to the very fabric of reality, and reality answered. A torrent of golden light, brighter and more intense than anything he had ever manifested before, exploded from his back. The scales of justice, now blazing with ethereal fire, appeared above his head. The scale representing the mindless robot's destructive potential plunged into a deep, bloody crimson. The scale representing his will to protect blazed with the light of a newborn star, soaring high. He didn't just feel the power. He was the power. He crouched on the fire escape, his muscles coiling. The 10 months of hell, every drop of sweat, every lifted weight, every agonizing run, it all converged into this single moment. He didn't need the stand to supercharge his body. His body was already ready. He launched himself off the fire escape. He wasn't flying. He was just jumping. But it was a jump fueled by a singular purpose. A leap that carried him soaring through the air, hundreds of feet into the sky, directly into the path of the zero-pointer. He was a green and gold comet streaking towards a metal giant. He saw the robot's head turn, its red optic focusing on the new, fast-approaching threat. It raised a colossal arm, a limb that weighed thousands of tons, and swatted at him as if he were a fly. This was the catalyst. The unjust act was in motion. Time seemed to warp. As the monstrous fist descended upon him, eternal justice fully materialized. It wasn't behind him this time. It was around him. The golden armor grafted itself onto his own body, encasing him in a suit of divine light. He felt its silent, implacable will merge with his own. He was no longer just Izuku Midoriya. He was the Vindicator. He drew back his own fist, his right fist, now encased in a radiant golden gauntlet. The zero-pointer's fist was a wall of steel, blotting out the sky. It was momentum. It was physics. It was unstoppable. It met a fist powered by justice. The impact was silent. For one infinitesimal moment, there was no sound, no explosion. Just a single point of contact between absolute force and absolute principle. The golden gauntlet of eternal justice touched the robot's fist, and all the kinetic energy, all the crushing, destructive power, all the conceptual injustice of the situation, it all just vanished. It was absorbed. Siphoned into the stand, into Izuku, in the blink of an eye. The scales of justice flared, burning with the light of a supernova. The absorbed power had nowhere to go. It was too much, too vast. It had to be released. Izuku's voice, merged with the silent will of his stand, roared a single word. A judgment. A verdict. Hanti-ai! He didn't throw a punch. He opened his hand. From the palm of the golden gauntlet, all the absorbed power, the kinetic energy of a 1,000-ton fist, amplified by the sheer wrongness of the scenario, was unleashed. It wasn't an explosion of fire and shrapnel. It was a focused, concentrated beam of pure, golden light. A lance of judgment. It pierced through the robot's fist, traveled up its arm, and struck its head with surgical precision. The zero-pointer's head vanished in a silent, brilliant flash of gold. The red optic flickered and died. The titanic body, now headless and lifeless, froze in mid-swing. It hung there for a moment, a monument to its own defeat, before its internal systems failed and it began to topple backwards, away from Uraraka, crashing into the buildings behind it with a deafening, final roar of collapsing metal. The backlash hit Izuku like a physical blow. The golden armor of eternal justice shattered into a million motes of light, fading away. The immense energy he had channeled, even for a split second, coursed through his body. It didn't feel like the gentle vertigo from the Mugger incident. This was a torrent, a flood. His right arm, the one that had delivered the verdict, felt like it was on fire and packed in ice at the same time, a deep, throbbing agony shooting from his fingertips to his shoulder. His legs, having performed a jump that defied all reason, screamed in protest, every fiber threatening to tear. He was hundreds of feet in the air, with no power, no stand, and no way to stop his descent. Gravity, which he had so spectacularly defied moments ago, reasserted its dominance with a vengeance. He plummeted. The ground rushed up to meet him. He saw Uraraka, now free from the rubble, her eyes wide with terror as she looked up at him. At least, I saved her, was his last coherent thought. He closed his eyes, bracing for the final impact. Whap! The impact was hard, but not fatal. He was jerked to a sudden, jarring halt about 10 feet from the ground. He dared to open an eye. He looked over and saw Uraraka, one hand outstretched towards him, the other slapped against her own face. He was floating again. She had saved him. Again. Release! She cried weakly, and he dropped the final 10 feet, landing in a heap on the pavement. He was conscious, but only just. The world was a spinning, blurry mess. Time's up. President Mick's voice boomed, signaling the end of the exam. Izuku lay on the cracked asphalt, his body a symphony of pain. His right arm was a useless, throbbing weight. His legs felt like jelly. He was utterly, completely drained. But he was alive. And she was safe. He looked over. Uraraka was now vomiting rainbows, a clear side effect of overusing her quirk to stop his fall. Even in her own distress, she had saved him. The other examinees began to cautiously creep back into the area, their faces a mixture of awe and disbelief. They stared at the decapitated, fallen zero-pointer, then at the small, broken boy lying on the ground, and couldn't connect the two. Did you see that? Someone whispered. He jumped, all the way up there. What kind of quirk is that? Some kind of super strength. But he destroyed the zero-pointer. That's impossible. It's worth no points. An elderly woman in a hero costume, the youthful heroine, recovery girl, made her way through the crowd. She checked on Uraraka first, then hobbled over to Izuku. My, she said, looking him over. You certainly did a number on yourself, dearie. One heck of a power you've got there. But you're not a very compatible vessel for it, are you? She leaned down and planted a soft kiss on his forehead. A wave of warmth spread through him, and the sharpest edges of his pain began to dull. His body was knitting itself back together, using his own stamina as fuel. The exhaustion deepened, pulling him under like a tide. His last conscious thought was a simple, bleak calculation. He had saved people. He had performed a miracle. But he had destroyed no paying villains. He had followed his plan. Final score 0 points. He had failed. He succumbed to the darkness, the murmuring of the crowd fading into nothing. In a darkened monitoring room, far above the battlegrounds, the faculty of UA High School was anything but silent. Did you see that boy? One of them exclaimed, pointing at a monitor showing a replay of Izuku's leap. His physical scores on the entrance exams were average at best, but that jump, that was all might level. And the power display! Another added, rewinding the footage of the golden beam. The energy output is off the charts. But our sensors detected no standard quirk factory emissions. It's like nothing I've ever seen. What is it? Aizawa Shoda, a tired-looking man wrapped in a scarf, stared at the screen with a critical, analytical eye. It's a one-trick fluke. He gets a massive burst of power, but it completely wrecks him. He'd be useless in a prolonged fight. He scored 0 villain points. He's out. I wouldn't be so sure, Shota, a cheerful, squeaky voice said. All heads turned to Principal Nizu, an animal of indeterminate species who was sipping tea and watching the screens with a gleam in his intelligent eyes. The exam is not just about fighting villains, Nizu continued, placing his teacup down. If it were, we would be a school for mercenaries, not heroes. He pressed a button, and another screen lit up. It showed Izuku's frantic journey through the city, pulling the girl with the tail to safety, tackling the other boy out of a cannon's path, clearing rubble. Instance after instance of pure, selfless altruism. This boy, Izuku Midoriya, Nizu said, ran around the entire exam focusing on nothing but helping his fellow examinees. He risked his own score, his own future, to ensure the safety of others. He then switched the main screen to the final moments. The 0-pointer. Uraraka trapped. Izuku's impossible leap. And then, when a fellow examinee was in true, mortal danger, he unleashed that incredible power. Not for points. Not for glory. But to save a life. He sacrificed himself, his body, and his chance of winning to do the right thing. Nizu's smile widened. Tell me, my esteemed colleagues, is that not the very definition of a hero? Aizawa grunted but didn't argue. The other teachers were murmuring in agreement. And so, Nizu concluded, it would be fundamentally illogical for a hero academy to reject someone who embodies heroism so perfectly. It's a good thing we have another way to score them. He pressed another button. On the main scoreboard, next to the columns for villain points, a new column appeared, rescue points. Next to examinee 7111, Ida Tenya, a score of 9 rescue points appeared. Next to examinee 2234, Uraraka Ochako, 28 rescue points popped up for saving Izuku. And then, next to examinee 2244, Izuku Midoriya, the number began to climb rapidly. 5 points for the first rescue. 7 for the second. 10 for clearing a path. The numbers spun like a slot machine. Finally they stopped. Izuku Midoriya, 60 rescue points. He had the highest rescue score in the entire exam. Combined with Uraraka's impressive 45 villain points, and Bakugo's dominant 77 villain points, they were all well above the passing grade. Nizu took another sip of his tea. Welcome to My Hero Academia, Izuku Midoriya, he chirped to the screen. You are going to be a very interesting puzzle to solve. 1 week later, an envelope arrived. It wasn't the thin, cruel letter of rejection Izuku had been steeling himself for, but a thick, important-looking packet bearing the unmistakable UA seal. His hands trembled as he tore it open in the privacy of his bedroom, his mother hovering anxiously outside the door. A small, metallic disc clattered onto his desk. A hologram flickered to life, bathing his all-might shrine in a cool blue light. And there he was, in all his golden-haired, muscle-bound glory. I am here! As a hologram, All Might launched into a speech about Izuku's performance on the written exam, which he had passed with flying colors. But Izuku barely heard it. His heart was hammering against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of hope and dread. He knew what was coming. The practical exam. The 0. And then we have the practical exam. All Might boomed. You got 0 villain points. Sorry. Izuku's heart plummeted. He had known it, but hearing it from his idol, even a holographic version, was a fresh stab of failure. He had been so sure about the rescue plan, but maybe it had all just been a childish fantasy. But that's not the whole story. All Might continued, his voice taking on a conspiratorial tone. A video feed popped up next to him, showing the nice girl, Uraraka, speaking to present mic after the exam. Excuse me, sir, she was saying. That boy with the curly hair, can you give him some of my points? He saved me. Twice. He was so heroic, he deserves to pass more than anyone. All Might's hologram beamed. Your actions inspired others to act heroically. That is the mark of a true hero. Then, the feed switched to the main event. The 0-pointer. The video, taken from a high-angle security camera, was breathtaking. It showed his impossible jump, the manifestation of eternal justice, the silent, brilliant beam of light that had decapitated the giant robot. It was one thing to have lived it. It was another to see it from an outside perspective, to truly grasp the sheer, insane scale of what he had done. But it's not just about inspiring others. How could a hero course reject someone who saved a life at great personal risk? That would be a mockery of everything we stand for. And so, we have a secret scoring system. The words rescue points flashed on the screen in bright, dazzling letters. Izuku Midoriya, you have earned 60 rescue points. And Uraraka Ochako, for saving you, has earned 45. You both pass. All Might pointed dramatically out of the hologram, directly at Izuku. Izuku Midoriya. Welcome. This is your Hero Academia. The hologram fizzled out, leaving Izuku in the sudden silence of his room. He sat there, stunned, the words echoing in his mind. You pass. Tears welled in his eyes, not of sadness, but of overwhelming, earth-shattering joy. He had done it. He had actually done it. He stumbled out of his room, where his mother was waiting, wringing her hands. I got in, he choked out, the words thick with emotion. Mom! I got in. Inko Midoriya's face crumpled, and she pulled him into a hug, sobbing tears of pure, unadulterated pride. Oh, Izuku! I'm so proud of you! I'm so proud! For the first time, her tears weren't for his limitations, but for his triumph. The first day of school was a trial by fire. Izuku, dressed in the smart, gray uniform, stood before the ridiculously oversized door of Class 1A. It was a door built for giants, a constant reminder that this was a place of power, a place where the extraordinary was the norm. He, with his 0 villain points and his conditional, mysterious guardian, felt decidedly ordinary. He took a deep breath and slid the door open. The classroom was already buzzing with a low hum of chatter. He immediately spotted the stern-faced student with glasses from the exam, who was standing with his feet planted firmly on top of a desk, arguing with a familiar, explosive blonde. Take your feet off that desk. The glasses-wearing student commanded, chopping the air with his hand. Such an action is an insult to our upperclassmen and the master craftsmen who built these desks. Like I care what you think, you four-eyed extra, Bakugo sneered, leaning back in his chair with a look of supreme arrogance. What junior high you from anyway? Some stuck-up elite school? Izuku flinched. He had hoped, prayed, that he and Kaken would be in different classes. No such luck. Their strange, tangled destiny continued. As he tried to slip by unnoticed, the glasses-wearing student spotted him. You! He said, striding over with mechanical precision. I am Ida Tenya, from Soulmate Private Academy. Oh, I'm Midoriya Izuku, he stammered, bowing. It's nice to meet you, Ida-kun. Midoriya-kun. Ida's face was a mask of grim seriousness. I must apologize. During the exam orientation, I misjudged you completely. While I was focused on the superficial nature of the test, you grasped its true purpose. You are the superior student. Izuku waved his hands frantically. And no, not at all. I just had a feeling about the rescue points. And speaking of the exam, a bright voice cut in. They both turned to see the nice girl, Uraraka Ochako, bouncing on the balls of her feet. It's you! The punchy jumpy boy. You were amazing, that jump, and then that punch. It was like wham! You totally smashed that huge robot. Her energy was infectious, and Izuku felt his cheeks heat up. Thanks, he mumbled. And thank you for, saving me from becoming a pavement pancake. And for trying to give me your points. It was the least I could do, she said with a grin. I'm Uraraka Ochako. It's great we're in the same class. The friendly atmosphere was shattered by a low growl from Bakugo's desk. Deku, he snarled, his red eyes narrowed into slits. Izuku froze. Don't think I don't know, Bakugo continued, his voice dangerously quiet. You lied to me. All these years acting like a useless, quirkless pebble, when you had a flashy power like that hidden away. You were looking down on me, weren't you? You're gonna pay for making a fool of me. Before Izuku could even attempt to form a reply, another voice, a tired, monotone drawl, came from the doorway. If you're here to make friends, you can pack up and leave. Everyone turned. Lying on the floor in a yellow sleeping bag, looking like a disheveled caterpillar, was a man with long, black hair and tired, bloodshot eyes. This is the hero course. He unzipped the bag and stood up, revealing himself to be their teacher. It took you all 8 seconds to quiet down. Life is short. You're not rational enough. He introduced himself as their homeroom teacher, Aizawa Shota. Izuku recognized him instantly from his hero database. The Erasure hero, Eraserhead. An underground hero who avoided the media spotlight. Aizawa wasted no time, pulling a UA gym uniform from his sleeping bag and telling them to get changed and meet him on the field. No entrance ceremony, no orientation. Just a test. Out on the field, Aizawa explained the situation with a distinct lack of enthusiasm. You've all been doing these since junior high. Standardized physical fitness tests. But here, you'll be doing them with your quirks. He tossed a softball to Bakugo. Bakugo. You finished first in the practical exam. What was your farthest softball throw in junior high? 67 meters, Bakugo said with a smirk. Try it with your quirk, Aizawa instructed. Bakugo stepped into the circle, a wicked grin spreading across his face. He wound up, and as he threw the ball, he ignited a massive explosion in his palm. Dai! He screamed, the word echoing across the field. The ball became a comet, soaring into the sky and disappearing from sight. Aizawa held up a device. 705.2 meters, he said flatly. The class erupted in excited chatter. 705 meters? Seriously? This looks so fun. We can use our quirks as much as we want. Fun? Aizawa's voice turned cold, and a menacing aura seemed to radiate from him. You think this is fun? You have 3 years here to become heroes. You think it's all going to be games and fun? The last place total gets expelled. A wave of panic washed over the class. Expelled? On the first day. Welcome to UA's hero course, Aizawa said, a cruel smile playing on his lips. His hair floated up, and his eyes glowed red. This is what it's all about. Izuku's blood ran cold. This was a disaster. All these tests were designed to measure raw, proactive power output, grip strength, the 50-meter dash, standing long jump. They were all things he had improved on, but without a quirk to augment them, he was leagues behind his super-powered classmates, and his stand, his guardian, would do nothing. There was no injustice in a fitness test. It would remain silent. The tests were a cascade of failures. For the 50-meter dash, Ida used the engines in his calves to clear it in 3.04 seconds. A frog-like girl named Ajuitsi used her powerful legs to bound across. Izuku ran it in 7.02 seconds, a respectable time for a normal high school athlete, but pathetic in this company. The grip strength test was even worse. A large, multi-armed boy named Shoji Mizo registered 540 kilograms. Izuku, despite his 10 months of strength training, barely managed 56 kilograms. He failed test after test, his scores consistently at the bottom of the pile. He could feel Aizawa's cold, analytical gaze on him. He wasn't just watching, he was judging, and Izuku knew he was being found wanting. The other students were starting to notice, too. The whispers started again. That's the kid who took out the 0-pointer, right? Maybe it was a fluke. He's not doing so hot. Is his quirk just a one-time use thing? That's kinda useless. He could feel the hope he had built up over the last week crumbling away, turning to dust. He was going to be expelled. He had gotten his foot in the door only to be kicked right back out. Finally, it was the last test, the ball throw. This was it. His last chance to show something. Anything. But what? He couldn't generate any force on his own. He stepped into the circle, the soft ball feeling heavy and cold in his hand. He thought back to the exam. To that feeling of power. He focused, trying to will eternal justice to appear, to imbue the ball with some kind of energy. He poured all his desperation, all his fear of failure, into his throw. He swung his arm, putting every ounce of his trained muscle into the motion. The ball left his hand with a soft thwump. Aizawa's device beeped. 46 meters. Izuku stared at the pathetic result, his heart sinking into his shoes. It was over. I was watching you, Midoriya. Aizawa's tired voice came from behind him. Izuku turned to see his teacher, eyes glowing a menacing red, his capture weapon scarf floating around his neck like angry snakes. I erased your quirk. Izuku blinked. You erased it? That ridiculous power from the entrance exam, Aizawa clarified. A power that injures you so severely is not viable. You can't keep needing someone to save you after every heroic act. You'd be a liability. His eyes narrowed. With a power like that, you can't become a hero. The words were an almost perfect echo of All Might's initial rejection on the rooftop. They hit Izuku with the force of a physical blow. He felt his resolve beginning to crack. Maybe they were right. Maybe he really couldn't do it. Aizawa's hair fell, and his eyes returned to normal. I've returned your quirk. You have one more throw. Get it done. He walked away, leaving Izuku alone in the circle, the weight of his entire future resting on one last, impossible attempt. Izuku's mind raced. He erased my quirk, but eternal justice isn't a quirk. So why couldn't I use it? Does his power work on stands too? Or was it just that my own desperation wasn't enough of a catalyst? He looked at his hand, then at the ball. Aizawa was right. Even if he could replicate the zero-pointer feat, it would shatter his arm and make him useless. He couldn't rely on that overwhelming, self-destructive power. He needed to be rational. He needed to think. Think. What were the rules? His stand was reactive. It absorbed energy and intent. It couldn't create power from nothing. He couldn't be the aggressor. But what if he wasn't the aggressor? What if he was the defender? An idea sparked in his mind. It was insane. It was audacious. It was probably against the rules. But it was all he had. He took a deep breath and turned to face the class. His eyes scanned the crowd of faces until they landed on the one he was looking for. The one person in the world whose aggression was a reliable, constant force. Kaken, Izuku said, his voice surprisingly steady. Bakugo, who had been watching with a contemptuous sneer, blinked. What did you say to me, you damn nerd? I need your help, Izuku said, holding up the softball. I need you to hit this. The class went silent. Aizawa, who had started to walk away, stopped and turned, an eyebrow raised in curiosity. Bakugo stared at him for a moment, then burst into laughter. It was a harsh, ugly sound. You want my help? After you humiliated me by getting into UA? You want me to give you a handout? It's not a handout, Izuku said, his gaze unwavering. I need an attack. A small one. An explosion. Right here. He held the ball out, his palm open. Your power is perfect fuel for mine. You know it. You felt it during the battle trial in our old school simulations, even when I didn't know what was happening. Your attacks, they make my power stronger. He was bluffing, connecting dots he wasn't sure were even there, but he sold it with every ounce of conviction he had. Bakugo's laughter died. His eyes narrowed. The idea that his power, his ultimate offensive tool, was nothing more than a battery for Dekus, it was the ultimate insult. It was a challenge. You think you can use me, you bastard? Bakugo snarled, a low growl in his throat. I think my power is a counter to yours, Izuku replied, his voice firm. And this is the only way I can pass this test. A manic grin spread across Bakugo's face. Sparks began to pop in his free hand. The desire to prove Izuku wrong, to show that his power was not something to be used, was overwhelming. Fine, he hissed, stalking towards the circle. You want an explosion, Deku? I'll give you an explosion. Aizawa didn't intervene. He just watched, his expression unreadable, a flicker of something akin to interest in his tired eyes. Bakugo stood in front of Izuku, his palm hovering over the softball in Izuku's hand. This is gonna hurt. I'm counting on it, Izuku said through gritted teeth. Bakugo unleashed a small, controlled, but undeniably powerful blast. Pop rocks! The explosion wasn't big, but it was concentrated and packed with Bakugo's signature aggressive intent. For anyone else, it would have been enough to blast the ball from their hand and leave them with severe burns. For Izuku, it was fuel. The moment the explosion detonated, eternal justice reacted. A golden gauntlet materialized around Izuku's hand and the ball, containing the blast completely. It didn't just block it, it drank it. The heat, the light, the kinetic force, and most importantly, the pure, undiluted malice Bakugo held for him. It was all siphoned into the stand in a microsecond. The scales of justice, invisible to everyone but him, flared brilliantly. He felt the now familiar surge of power, not the overwhelming flood of the zero-pointer, but a clean, potent charge. He didn't redirect it as a beam. He didn't let it shatter his arm. He channeled it, following a new instinct, a new understanding of his own power. He funneled the absorbed energy not into a destructive blast, but into a single, kinetic push. His arm, guided by the stand, swung forward. He wasn't just throwing the ball with his own strength. He was throwing it with the redirected force of Bakugo's explosion. The ball shot from his hand. There was no sonic boom, no trail of fire. Just a silent, impossibly fast departure. It was a tiny white speck one moment, and gone the next. It soared higher and farther than Bakugo's, a perfect arc against the blue sky. The class was stunned into silence. Bakugo stared at his own smoking palm, then at Izuku's completely unharmed hand, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. Izuku stood there, breathing heavily. His arm tingled with residual energy, but there was no pain. No broken bones. He had controlled it. He had been rational. Aizawa raised his device. He stared at it for a long moment, then looked at Izuku. A slow, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. He held up the device for the class to see. 705.3 meters. He had beaten Bakugo. By 1/10 of a meter. The implication was clear. He had taken Bakugo's own power, his own rage, and used it to surpass him. The stunned silence was broken by Bakugo's roar of pure, unadulterated fury. "DKU, you bastard!" He lunged, his hands sparking, only to be instantly snared and immobilized by Aizawa's capture weapon. "Stand down," Aizawa said, his voice flat, his eyes glowing red again. He passed the test. That's all. He deactivated his quirk and reeled Bakugo in. As the final scores were tallied, Izuku Midoriya was not in last place. That dubious honor went to a short, purple-haired boy named Mineta, who was now weeping openly. "By the way," Aizawa said, addressing the class as he released Bakugo. The expulsion thing was a logical deception. The class stared at him, dumbfounded. It was a rational tactic to draw out your absolute best. The collective sigh of relief was audible. A girl with a black ponytail, Jayuro Zumomo, pointed out that of course it was a lie. It should have been obvious. As they headed back to the classroom, Uraraka and Ida flanked him. "Midoriya-kun, that was incredible." Uraraka gushed. "You used Bakugo's power against him. What is your quirk? It's so cool and mysterious." "Indeed." Ida chopped the air. "A highly strategic and symbiotic ability. To weaponize an opponent's aggression is a mark of high-level thinking." "I misjudged you yet again." Izuku just smiled, a real, genuine smile. "I'm still figuring it out," he said, which was the honest truth. He looked over at Bakugo, who was stalking ahead of them, his shoulders rigid with anger. This wasn't a victory in their rivalry. It was an escalation. He had proven his power wasn't just a self-destructive one-off. He had proven it could adapt. He had proven it could be controlled. Later, as Aizawa was walking back to the teacher's lounge, he passed the skeletal, wheezing figure leaning against the wall. "So, what do you think of him?" Tashinori asked, a hopeful look in his sunken eyes. Aizawa sighed. "He's a problem child. Zero baseline offensive capability. His power is entirely conditional and requires him to put himself in harm's way. He's reckless and has no self-preservation instincts." Tashinori's face fell, but Aizawa continued, a rare, faint smirk on his face. "He's not irrational. The way he analyzed his own limitations and found a loophole in the test's parameters by baiting Bakugo, that shows a high-level strategic mind. He has potential. A lot of it. Don't worry, Tashinori. I won't expel your boy." He paused. "But I am going to work him to the bone." As Izuku sat in the classroom, listening to the afternoon's lectures, he felt the faint, comforting presence of his stand, a silent guardian at his back. He had survived the first day. He had proven he belonged. He wasn't just a quirkless kid. He wasn't just a kid who broke his arm. He was Izuku Midoriya, the student with a guardian, a boy armed with his own intellect and a power that weighed justice on its eternal scales. And his journey was just beginning. The afternoon sun streamed through the massive windows of the Class 1A classroom, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The ordinary curriculum, English, math, literature, was blessedly normal, a brief respite from the quirk-centric chaos of the morning. Izuku furiously scribbled notes, his mind still buzzing from the close call with Aizawa. He had survived, but just barely. His solution to the ball throw had been a stroke of desperate genius, but it had also painted a massive, glowing target on his back. A target for one person in particular. He could feel Bakugo's glare boring into the back of his head, a palpable force of heat and fury. He hadn't said a word to Izuku since the test, a silence that was somehow more menacing than his usual explosive rage. It was the silence of a predator recalculating its attack, observing a prey that had suddenly, inexplicably, grown fangs. Izuku had not only used Bakugo's power, he had turned it into a tool for his own success, a humiliation Bakugo's pride could never endure. A confrontation was inevitable. The final bell of the day was about to ring when the classroom door slammed open with enough force to rattle the windows. "I am here!" All Might stood in the doorway, not entering normally, but bursting in with the flamboyant energy of a comic book splash page. He was clad in his Silver Age costume, a vibrant, nostalgic choice that sent a ripple of excitement through the class. "Welcome to the most important class at UA High!" he boomed, his smile so bright it seemed to have its own gravitational pull. "Hero basic training! Here, we will build you into heroes from the ground up, and for our first lesson, we're going to dive right into the deep end with a trial by combat." The class erupted. "Combat!" A red-haired boy with spiky teeth, Kirishima Aijiro, exclaimed, hardening his fists. "This is what I'm talking about." All Might dramatically gestured to the wall, where panels slid open to reveal numbered cases. "And you can't be a hero without the right look. These cases contain the costumes you submitted in your design applications. Get changed and meet me at ground beta." A wave of pure, unadulterated joy washed over Izuku. His costume! He had poured his heart and soul into the design, sketching it out over countless nights. But it had been his mother who, in a gesture of overwhelming support, had taken his childish drawing and had it professionally made. The boys' changing room was a chaotic mix of excitement and nervous energy. Izuku found his case, number 13, and opened it. Inside was a teal-green jumpsuit, a testament to his mother's love. It was a full-body suit with a white diamond pattern, a red belt loaded with practical pouches, elbow and knee pads, and sturdy red boots. The most distinct feature was the headpiece, a mask with long, ear-like protrusions, mimicking All Might's iconic hairstyle, and a metal respirator that vaguely resembled a smile. It was a little dorky, a little on the nose, but it was his. It was the first physical manifestation of his dream. As he pulled on the suit, he noticed the other boys' costumes. Ida's was a full suit of knightly armor, complete with exhaust pipes on his back. Kirishima was bare-chested, a jagged red cloth over his shoulder, showing off his rock-hard skin. Todoroki's was simple and practical, a white uniform half covered in what looked like frost. And Bakugo, his was pure aggression. A black, sleeveless top, baggy pants, and massive, grenade-shaped gauntlets on his forearms. They looked ridiculously oversized, but knowing Bakugo, they were undoubtedly functional and deadly. When they all gathered at the entrance to Ground Beta, the cityscape where they'd taken their entrance exam, All Might gave a hearty laugh. "They say the clothes make the hero, and you all look like the real deal." Izuku spotted Uraraka and jogged over. Her costume was a sleek, pink and black bodysuit with a puffy helmet and oversized boots, designed to minimize the nausea from her quirk. "Wow, Uraraka-san, your costume is so cool. You think so?" She beamed. "Yours is really neat too. It's so you. Very down-to-earth and heroic." Izuku blushed under his mask. Before he could stammer a reply, All Might called for their attention. "All right, fledglings. Here's the scenario. Most villain encounters happen indoors. So, for this trial, you'll be split into two-person teams, one hero and one villain. The villains will be guarding a nuclear weapon hidden somewhere in this building. The heroes have two ways to win: either capture the villains with this special capture tape, or secure the weapon before time runs out. The villains win by either capturing the heroes or protecting the weapon until time expires. It was a classic, high-stakes scenario. Izuku's mind was already racing, analyzing potential strategies. Team selection will be decided by drawing lots, All Might announced, producing a box. One by one, the students drew their teams. Ida and Bakugo were paired as Team D. Todoroki and Shoji were Team B. And then it was Izuku's turn. He reached in and pulled out a ball. Team A. He looked around, and saw Uraraka holding up a matching ball. A wave of relief washed over him. He was paired with someone friendly, someone whose quirk he had at least a basic understanding of. This was good. Then came the matchup. All Might reached into 2 boxes, one marked hero and one villain. And our first combatants will be... He pulled out 2 balls. Team A as the heroes versus Team D as the villains. The blood drained from Izuku's face. His first official combat trial. His first chance to prove himself after the fitness test. And he was being pitted against the one person he wanted to avoid more than anyone else on the planet, Bakugo Katsuki. Bakugo's reaction was chilling. He didn't cheer or gloat. He just smiled. It was a slow, predatory smile that didn't reach his eyes. His gaze was locked on Izuku, and it promised a world of pain. This wasn't a training exercise for him. This was a hunt. This was revenge. The other students were led to a monitoring room with All Might, where they could watch the fight unfold. Izuku and Uraraka were left standing outside the target building, a 5-story concrete monolith. They were given a floor plan, a roll of capture tape, and a small earpiece to communicate. So, any ideas? Uraraka asked, her voice a little shaky. We're up against Bakugo-kun and Ida-kun. Ida seems super serious and fast, and Bakugo, well, he's just plain scary. Izuku forced himself to focus, to push down the primal fear that Bakugo always invoked in him. This wasn't the powerless Deku from middle school. He had trained. He had a power. And he had a partner. He spread the floor plan on the ground. Okay. Kaken. Bakugo is almost certainly going to come straight for me. He's not a strategist, he's a guided missile. He'll see this as a personal grudge match. He'll ignore you and the objective to try and crush me. That's not very heroic of him. Uraraka noted. He doesn't care about the objective right now, Izuku said, his voice grim. He only cares about proving he's stronger than me. We can use that. I'll be the bait. I'll draw him out and keep him busy. While I'm doing that, you use your quirk to find the weapon. Ida is fast, but he's a ground-based fighter. You have the advantage of verticality. You can float past him, avoid his defenses, and get to the objective. Uraraka looked at him, her eyes wide. But, are you sure you can handle Bakugo by yourself? He's so aggressive. Izuku took a deep breath, the filtered air from his respirator hissing softly. Handle him? No. I can't beat him in a fight. Not head-on. But my power! Eternal justice, it's a perfect counter to his. His attacks are fueled by pure rage and pride. He has an absolute, unwavering intent to harm and humiliate me. For my stand, that's like a 5-star meal. I can't win by fighting him, but I can win by surviving him. He looked at her, his eyes serious behind his mask. I trust you, Uraraka-san. Can you trust me? She hesitated for a moment, then nodded firmly, her expression hardening with resolve. Okay, Deku-kun. I trust you. Let's do this. She gave him a thumbs up. Let's be heroes. All right, hero team. You may begin. All Might's voice crackled in their earpieces. They slipped into the building through a ground floor window. The interior was a maze of gray concrete corridors and empty rooms, the air thick with dust. It was eerily quiet. This is too quiet, Uraraka whispered. I thought Bakugo would ambush us at the door. No, Izuku whispered back, his eyes scanning every corner. He wants to find me. He wants to corner me. He's enjoying the hunt. They crept down the first-floor hallway, backs to the wall. As they rounded a corner, it happened. A massive explosion erupted from the end of the intersecting corridor. Bakugo came flying out of the smoke, propelled by his quirk, his face a mask of pure, joyous fury. He wasn't aiming for both of them. He was aiming directly for Izuku. "Deku!" he roared. Izuku reacted on pure instinct. "Uraraka, go!" he yelled, pushing her back around the corner. He turned to face the onslaught, his mind going into a state of hyperfocus. This was it. No time for fear. Only justice. Bakugo's right hand was cocked back, palm glowing orange. A wide, sweeping right hook, his signature opening move. It wasn't just a punch, it was a statement. "You're beneath me." The malice, the raw, undiluted intent to cause pain, washed over Izuku like a physical wave. An eternal justice answered the call. A brilliant golden light flared into existence. The stand manifested, not fully, but partially. A single, ornate golden gauntlet formed around Izuku's left arm, moving with a speed that was not his own. It came up just in time to block Bakugo's explosive punch. Boom! The explosion was deafening in the enclosed hallway. The force of it should have shattered Izuku's arm and sent him flying. But the golden gauntlet held firm. It didn't even budge. The flames of the explosion licked around the golden armor before being drawn into it, absorbed like water into a sponge. The kinetic force simply vanished. Bakugo's eyes widened in shock. His most powerful opening move had been neutralized as if it were a gentle breeze. He stared at the glowing gauntlet, a look of disbelief warring with his rage. From the monitoring room, the other students gasped. "Whoa! He just blocked Bakugo's blast like it was nothing!" Kirishima exclaimed. "What is that power?" Yayarosa murmured, her brow furrowed in thought. "A reinforcement-type quirk?" "No, it looks like a projection, a sentient one, almost." All Might watched, a grim expression on his face. "Now the real test begins, my boy. Let's see how you handle the storm." Back in the hallway, Izuku didn't press an attack. He just stood there, the golden gauntlet still shimmering around his arm. The invisible scales of justice tipped dramatically, absorbing the injustice of Bakugo's unprovoked, furious assault. He could feel the power coursing through him, a clean, potent energy waiting to be unleashed. "What the hell is that, Deku?" Bakugo snarled, taking a step back. "Another one of your cheap tricks? It's my quirk, Kaken," Izuku said, his voice steady. He had to keep him talking. Keep him focused on him. Bakugo's face twisted in fury. "Don't you call me that! You think you're better than me now? With your little light show?" He launched himself forward again, this time with a flurry of smaller, faster explosions, trying to overwhelm Izuku's defenses. It was a brilliant, chaotic dance. Explosions rocked the hallway, filling it with smoke and the smell of nitroglycerin. Izuku moved with a grace and speed he hadn't possessed a year ago, a product of his hellish training. He wasn't attacking. He was just dodging, weaving, and blocking. Each time an explosion got too close, a piece of eternal justice would flicker into existence, a greave to block a low kick, a pauldron to absorb a shoulder charge, the gauntlet to parry a direct blast. He was completely, utterly on the defensive. Yet he was untouchable. Every one of Bakugo's attacks, fueled by years of pent-up rage and a lifetime of arrogant pride, was perfect fuel. The stand was practically humming with absorbed energy. The scales glowed brighter and brighter, a visual representation of the one-sided nature of the conflict. Izuku was defending himself. Bakugo was attacking with killing intent in a training exercise. The injustice was palpable. Bakugo was getting more and more frustrated. He was the most powerful person he knew. His offense was overwhelming, and yet this useless Deku, this pebble, was weathering his storm without a scratch, his face calm and focused behind that stupid smiling mask. "Stand still and fight me!" Bakugo roared, unleashing another massive blast that blew a chunk out of the concrete wall behind Izuku. Izuku just sidestepped it. "I am fighting you, Kaken. This is my fight." He was learning. He could feel the flow of power from the stand. He wasn't just a passenger anymore. He was beginning to understand the rhythm of it. He could feel which attacks were more unjust than others, which ones provided more fuel. He could anticipate the stand's manifestation, working with it, moving his body in sync with its divine interventions. Meanwhile, Uraraka was making her way through the building. She could hear the constant explosions from a few floors below. Deku was holding up his end of the bargain. Now it was her turn. She found the 5th floor, where she suspected the bomb was located. The corridor was completely empty. Too empty. Ida was a smart, by-the-book fighter. He would have defenses. As she crept forward, Ida suddenly appeared, moving at an incredible speed. Aha! I knew you would come here, hero. Your partner's noisy distraction was an obvious ploy. He was in full villain mode, cackling maniacally. Prepare to face the wrath of Ida Tenya, he charged, but Uraraka was ready. She slapped her hands on the wall, activated her quirk, and pushed off, floating gracefully up to the ceiling, easily evading his ground-based rush. Curses! An anti-gravity quirk! Ida exclaimed, looking up at her. He started monologuing about his evil plans, a tactic he'd clearly learned from watching too many cartoons. While he was distracted, Uraraka floated over his head and towards the room containing the bomb. Back downstairs, the battle had reached a fever pitch. Bakugo was panting, sweat beading on his forehead. Izuku was also breathing heavily, the constant dodging taking a physical toll. The hallway was a wreck, pockmarked with blast craters and filled with smoke. Bakugo stopped, a terrifyingly calm look on his face. He raised his massive gauntlets. Deku, he said, his voice dangerously low. You know what these are for. My quirk secretes a nitroglycerin-like sweat. These gauntlets store it up. He grinned, a sliver of his old confidence returning. I can create an explosion on the scale of a real bomb. In the monitoring room, All Might's eyes widened. Bakugo, my boy, don't do it! You'll kill him! He yelled into the comms. He'll be fine if he dodges. Bakugo yelled back, pulling a pin on his gauntlet. A targeting laser painted a red dot on Izuku's chest. There was nowhere to run. The hallway was a kill box. Dodging wasn't an option. Izuku's mind went into overdrive. This attack was different. This was overwhelming force, born of pure, frustrated rage. The injustice of it was off the charts. The scales above him glowed with an almost painful intensity. The power he would absorb from this would be immense. Enough to level the building if he fired it back. But that was the key. He couldn't fire it back. This was a school exercise. Retaliating with lethal force, even against an opponent using it, would be unjust in the context of the trial. He would be no better than Bakugo. His stand, a being of absolute principle, might even refuse the command. He had to find another way. The objective. Capture the weapon. Win the trial. He had a sudden, brilliant, insane idea. Uraraka-san, status! He yelled into his comms. I'm at the bomb. But Ida's here. He's cleared out the room. There's nothing for me to make float to use as a weapon. Don't worry about him. Just get ready to grab the bomb. On my signal! Izuku yelled back. Bakugo laughed. Talking to your girlfriend? Say your prayers. He fired. Howitzer impact! A colossal, concentrated beam of explosive energy erupted from his gauntlet. It was a tunnel of pure destruction, incinerating the air, turning the concrete walls to molten slag as it rocketed towards Izuku. Izuku stood his ground. He didn't flinch. He didn't even try to dodge. Eternal justice manifested fully. The Golden Knight appeared, a silent, indomitable fortress of light. It stood in front of Izuku, its arms crossed over its chest. The howitzer impact, an attack that could have leveled a city block, slammed into the stand. The result was an eerie, breathtaking silence. The explosion, the fire, the force, it all just collapsed inwards, drawn into the stand's form like a black hole consuming light. The golden armor glowed, first white-hot, then a blinding, pure gold as it absorbed the cataclysmic amount of energy. For a split second, the stand was a miniature sun, so bright that the cameras in the monitoring room whited out. Bakugo stared, his jaw hanging open in utter disbelief. His ultimate attack, his trump card, had been swallowed whole. Izuku felt the power surge through him. It was an ocean, a hurricane of raw, conceptual energy. It was far more than he had felt from the zero-pointer. It begged to be released, to be fired back at its source. But he held it. He fought his own instincts, his own fear and anger. He had another purpose for this power. Now, Uraraka-san! He screamed. Instead of firing the energy back at Bakugo, he gave his stand a different command. He channeled the entirety of the absorbed howitzer impact, not outwards, but downwards. Hanti! The stand slammed its feet into the floor. The golden energy, instead of becoming a beam, became a kinetic shockwave, a directed earthquake. It didn't spread outwards. It shot upwards, a pillar of pure force traveling through the building's superstructure. The floor beneath Bakugo's feet buckled. The ceiling above him cracked. On the 5th floor, Uraraka felt the entire building lurch violently. The floor beneath her feet exploded upwards. Ida was thrown off balance. Chunks of concrete and debris were blasted into the air. This was her chance. "Comet home run!" she yelled. She touched a large piece of pillar debris, making it weightless, then smacked it with another chunk of concrete. It sailed through the air, a barrage of improvised projectiles that sent Ida scrambling. While he was distracted, she activated her quirk on herself and shot towards the bomb. With a determined cry, she wrapped her arms around the massive prop. "I've got it!" she yelled. "Hero team wins!" All Might's voice roared through the building. Down in the ruined hallway, Izuku collapsed to his knees, the backlash hitting him hard. The sheer amount of energy he had channeled, even without firing it, had left him dizzy and nauseous. Eternal justice faded away, its duty done. Bakugo stood amidst the wreckage, trembling. He wasn't trembling with rage anymore. It was something else. Shock. Confusion. And a dawning, terrifying understanding. He had used his ultimate attack, an attack he believed was unstoppable. And Deku hadn't just blocked it. He hadn't just survived it. He had used it. He had taken Bakugo's rage, his pride, his ultimate power, and turned it into the very tool that won the match, without ever throwing a single punch back at him. He had been defeated not by superior strength, but by superior strategy, and a power that operated on a level he couldn't even comprehend. It didn't just block his attacks, it judged them, and it had found his pride wanting. Izuku looked up at his rival, his childhood friend, his bully. He saw the bewildered, broken look in his eyes. He had won the trial, but the look on Bakugo's face didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a verdict had been passed on their entire, twisted relationship. And Izuku wasn't sure who had been judged the winner.